is going on, guys? And welcome to episode 10 of the Mark and Graham podcast. Follow us on Instagram and follow us on Twitter at Mark and Graham _podcast. We decided to do something special for you guys, and we are going to deliver. We are in person for episode 10. We started this way back in the summer, and we are finally here in December filming our 10th episode. You know, it's been a little hard with finals and everything, but we promise to deliver Mark and Graham content at least twice a month to you guys. That is our goal. Remember, follow us on Instagram and follow us on Twitter. We got a great show for you today. We know we've been gone a while, but we are back and we are here to stay. So, Mark, just a little break it down. What have you been up to the past few weeks with Monmouth and everything?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun here at school. Been very busy though. That's why it's been a little bit difficult for the two of us to get together and record. I've been covering the Monmouth football team this year. They just got bounced this past weekend by James Madison in the second round of the FCS playoffs. But they were a great team this year, really fun to watch. So I've been covering that. We're going to head into basketball season soon. Going to be covering Monmouth men's and women's basketball teams, and then heading into baseball and lacrosse season come spring. So it's been busy, but it's always a lot of fun. I love my sports. I love covering them, and it's been an honor to do it at Monmouth this year.
So yeah, just a little recap of what Mark and Graham really was. Since we are on the 10th episode, I feel like we should touch base on that a little bit. I'm a radio guy. I want to be on TV. I'm a big sports guy, and Mark's a big sports writer. He's the head editor at The Outlook for Monmouth Sports, correct, for the sports section. And I figured, you know, I have the radio, he's got the writing, and we both have the knowledge, and we put it together. And we're just trying to make content that you all enjoy. And so Mark brought up the NBA, and I feel like that leads us perfectly into our first section of the day, the clowns of the day. So Mark, if you want to talk about, you know, who your clown of the day is.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty obvious one for what's been going on across all sports, but especially the NBA world lately with reffing. And everybody remembers that call the other night in the Rockets game when James Harden had a dunk that got overturned for it didn't count because the ball came through the hoop.
It should have counted.
It was absurd. The Rockets end up losing by 2 points that they would have clearly gotten from the dunk that was not considered a dunk. And it makes you question why sports even have replay if they're not going to use it to their benefit in a situation like that where the game was determined by that. And when you look at the replay, it was obvious. It's not an opinion.
Very obvious.
It's not an opinion call. You can literally see the ball go through the hoop and the net come back around and then it fall out. It was clearly a basket, and the Rockets actually appealed the game, which to have a win or a loss in any sport appealed, something really crazy has to happen, and I just think it's not a good look for the NBA or the sports world in general.
And you know, just to clarify why this is such a big deal, the Rockets outscored their opponent. Who are they playing?
I forget.
And it doesn't even matter. But they outscored their opponent in regulation with the dunk. So overtime would have never happened. And but the Rockets are supposed to win games, and I think this one game really should have mattered to them. But we'll touch base on officiating in one sec. But I'm gonna start laughing when I talk about my clown of the day. I gotta focus my inner Stephen A. here. Mr. Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. I just want to say thank you for embarrassing yourself, for making us Giant fans not look crazy. The Cowboys are the worst, most poorly coached team in the NFL. I have never seen an owner make so many excuses for his mistake of not firing Jason Garrett mid-season. All they have to do is get rid of this guy's play calling, and this team is going to win 13 games in one season. You look at quarterback, running back, left tackle, guards, wide receivers, corners, D linemen, linebackers. They have a superstar athlete in every single one of those places. Jerry Jones paid and drafted this team not for Jason Garrett to win 8 games in a season and not win the playoffs and not win a Super Bowl. He accumulated this team to win a Super Bowl. And this Cowboys team is going to go down as the best team to ever be so subpar in record. Their performances have been god awful. Their play calling has been god awful, and it's just adding more embarrassment to the NFC East. The Redskins, the Cowboys, and the Giants. Or excuse me, not the Cowboys. The Redskins, the Eagles, and the Giants are all terrible. And maybe if our first place team was doing well, maybe it'd be okay. The Cowboys are an embarrassment. They are terrible. I hate them. I hate Jason Garrett. I hate Jerry Jones. I hate that entire organization because once they find a good coach, they're going to start winning games. And as a Giants fan, I don't like that. But for right now, this is hysterical to watch. Now, before I go on a 10-minute rampage on the Cowboys, we're going to backtrack a little bit to officiating and replay. Mark, if you want to really talk about the issue that we've faced, ever since, really the middle of, this decade, I'd say, 2015 when technology started to become more advanced. What have you seen, technology do to officiating?
I think the biggest thing is this year in the NFL, this whole being able to review a penalty and especially these pass interference plays, which all stems from the Saints getting.
All stems from the Saints.
It's all because
rightfully deserved.
The Saints no call, but the reality is it's taking all of the opinion out of sports, and I just think when you're looking at a pass interference play and you're allowing refs to go look back at it and review it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a call. It's an opinion call, no matter what. So when you can go back and look at it, like what are you really deciding? I think it's rewriting history in a lot of the sense, and it reminds me of the conversation in baseball of do you use robo umps now? Like it's not something I've ever been a proponent for. That's part of the sport. That's part of what's been around for ages and makes it what it is today. I just think you can't take all of the opinion out of officiating in sports. And it's really hurting the NFL this year.
Yeah, definitely, backpacking off what Mark said, you have guys that, train to make these calls. And obviously, if you saw the Saints-Rams game, it was a pass interference call. But I think this call to allow pass interference to be reviewed, I think that was more to appease the Saints and the fans. But, perfect example of how this shouldn't happen is, this past week, the Dolphins and the Jets. Brian Flores has those guys working hard. The Dolphins may suck. They're so bad, but they work hard. And that pass interference call that the Jets decided to review, or I don't even think the Jets decided to review it. It was the officials that wanted to review it. It ruined the game because, it gave the Jets an extra 15 yards. They kick a field goal and they win 22-21. And Brian Flores was rightfully pissed off, yelling at the referees. He didn't want to comment after the game, rightfully understood. I think that, these reviewable plays or penalties is sort of, it's sort of like a middle finger to the referees and the umpires. I feel like they work so hard to get where they are. Why are we saying, nah, we don't trust your judgment? Because that's the whole point of an umpire, right? It's a judgment-based call. And I think what Mark's saying is, a lot of those momentum swings happen on big calls. And, you look at baseball. When a manager starts to argue, it's a big momentum swing. It gets the crowd going. It's fun. It's fun to watch. It makes the sport what it is. And I'm going to let Mark talk a little bit about, the baseball and how that's going to affect baseball. But, as for NFL, I feel like it's going to ruin the authenticity of the game because, people are going to start wanting to review holding calls now. People are going to want to start reviewing face mask calls. And it's just going to become a certain point where it's like, if I'm a referee, I could call anything at this point and it gets reviewed.
Yeah, what I would compare it to in the baseball world is imagine the difference is like you can use replay in baseball to argue an out safe call, which is so reasonable. That's something a camera can decide and it's very clear. This is the same way in football. You've always been able to challenge an out of bounds play. Whether he was in bounds, he got both feet in bounds, always been able to challenge that, and that's acceptable. That's using technology in a fair, beneficial way to the sport. Now, with NFL teams being able to challenge a pass interference call, that to me is like in baseball as if they could end up challenging ball strikes. And that's a very dangerous boundary to cross into for the sport. I just think the NFL might end up having to reverse this rule very soon. Otherwise, the sport is going to see some major repercussions.
Do you see maybe baseball looking at the NFL, and if the NFL keeps proceeding, do you think baseball is going to get into a point where they might start calling balls and strikes? Because people who don't know baseball, you're not allowed to argue balls and strikes. The balls and strikes, that is one thing that is the home umpire's call, and there's zero arguing about it. And balls and strikes, you may understand that a starting pitcher throws almost 100 every game. There's so many pitches, but it's one pitch. And I think the perfect example of the one pitch was, if you watch the Astros during the playoffs, it always came down to one pitch. Correa, that ball doesn't get called a strike for the inning to be over. Correa hits a double for an RBI. It's very, very little things like that. And I think if we start, using technology to call balls and strikes, it's going to ruin the game of baseball completely.
I agree. I think it's very dangerous. It's something that, baseball's been the way it has for so long, and I get it. I get people, for the younger generation, we have no patience. People just don't sit down and watch a baseball game for 3 hours anymore. They want things that'll speed it up, but you can't do things that are going to lose a sport that's been loved for so long and lose the great things about it.
All right, so moving on from the obvious issues of officiating in the world of sports, this episode is going to be a little bit different. Me and Mark decided to accumulate a bunch of lists for our, 10th episode. And before we get into all the top 10s, with week 15 approaching of the NFL season, we're almost done. It's crazy how fast the season goes by. I'm going to miss it. I love having Red Zone, though. If you don't have Red Zone, you should definitely check that out. No, that wasn't an ad. But so me and Mark decided to list all the awards for the NFL that we think are going to be handed out to which players. So we started with MVP, Offensive Player, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, and then Coach of the Year. So Mark, you want to start at the bottom or you want to start at the top?
We can start with Coach of the Year. We'll work our way up.
All right, so Mark, I feel like you should go second for Coach of the Year just because yours is way out of left field for some people that don't understand really what Coach of the Year means. But I'm gonna, I'm big on giving it to the guy whose numbers don't lie, and for me that's Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan just won a crazy shootout game in New Orleans. You didn't watch that game. It almost reminded me of of the Rams Chiefs last season. Offensive shootout, defense wasn't existent. It was more of who gets a stop first kind of deal. And Kyle Shanahan has done a great job with this 49ers team. And I know they're stacked. I know the 49ers have a great defense. But, the way that they flow from offense to defense and they don't really count on each other. And, the defense may give up a touchdown, but they know the offense is going to do their job. And, if Jimmy G does something wrong, they know the defense is going to hand it out. I think Kyle Shanahan has done a great job at, exploiting everything that the 49ers are good at. And, that is throwing the ball down the field. That is having your speedster guys. He's made some great acquisitions over the year with Emmanuel Sanders. He's not even doing this with his fastest wide receiver right now, Marquise Goodwin. And you know what? Jimmy Garoppolo coming off a torn ACL, you can make an argument, and I'm not saying he's going to win. I don't think he's going to win. But in a year or two, you could start making an argument that Jimmy G could be an MVP and ultimately better than Tom Brady because according to the numbers, I know he hasn't won Super Bowls. According to listen, Jimmy is really good. He went 5-0 last year, tore his ACL, out for the season. Comes back, he leads his team to 10-3. A team that at the beginning of the season people were doubting. Richard Sherman said it. He said, if you are doubting us, keep doubting us. Mm-hmm. The 49ers, I would not sleep on them, and I would not sleep on Coach Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan is my Coach of the Year.
I definitely see that, and I think he probably is going to win it. People love to the Coach of the Year is almost always the team that came out of nowhere and performed, which there's always one every year, and Kyle Shanahan could easily get it this year. McVay got it a couple years ago when the Rams surprised. But for me, I'm going to go a little bit of a under-the-radar route, and I think Mike Tomlin deserves it.
It's a
What
good
he's
pick.
done with the Steelers this year, I mean, Big Ben, when he goes out week 1 or 2, I forget exactly when.
I think we should start with Mike Tomlin. We should start last year. This has been, I think, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think this has been, since the Le'Veon Bell garbage started happening.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to start there, I think that's where Mike Tomlin's story really starts with this team.
I mean, yeah, in the offseason, he loses Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and I mean, it was a circus all of last year. And then you even had, it looked like Juju Smith-Schuster and James Conner were clear replacements. I mean, I picked the Steelers to win their division still this year. I thought it was a stacked team, even without Le'Veon and Antonio. But when you think about what has happened this year now, Big Ben goes down week 1 or 2. You're dealing with Mason Rudolph now, who even got benched because he was terrible. They're on to their third-string quarterback, Delvin Hodges, who is still terrible in my opinion. Fourth.
I think it was, oh, yeah, you're right. It was his third.
And then James Conner has been injured all year. He's hardly played even 4 games, I think, this year. And you have Juju Smith-Schuster, who's been on the shelf all year. They're working with all their third-string talent on this team right now, and Mike Tomlin is still currently holding a playoff spot. They're only a couple games back, I believe, even of the Ravens.
And this is a team, like he just said, the Ravens. All right, forget the 1-12 Bengals, right? This is a team who theoretically coming into this season should be in third place. With the Browns, who have Landry, Njoku, Myles Garrett, Odell, Baker Mayfield, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb. Like, the weapons are there. And the Ravens, who are a definite possibility for the Super Bowl based on how they're playing now. And they're 7-5. And Mark, I think Mike Tomlin, like you said, the numbers don't lie. That's why I think Shanahan's going to win it.
Mm-hmm.
But if this was based on your record and who you have, I definitely think Mike Tomlin would be up there. All right, so Defensive Rookie of the Year. It's actually funny because we each picked players from the same teams we just chose. So I guess I'll start. Everyone knows who it. The front runner, I believe, is still going to win it, and that's Nick Bosa at Little Bear 97. His brother Big Bear is Joey Bosa. That's their Twitter handles. Nick Bosa is dominant. The guy runs from sideline to sideline. He's a defensive end. He has at least 4 quarterback pressures a game. He has at least 3 tackles a game, and he has, I think, over 8.5 sacks right now. And he's just putting up numbers that you don't see coming from rookies that aren't named J.J. Watt,
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it's a good pick. He's probably going to win it as well, but I'll go a little bit different route. Devin White from the Pittsburgh Steelers been very, very good this season. I believe he went to, is it LSU or Michigan?
LSU.
He's just a stud, and I'm going to give him the pick. It's hard to see when Shazier went down, but they're replacing already with a guy that's having a great year.
Yeah, just the Steelers have been a team that have had to face countless crap. Their middle linebacker paralyzes himself, and Ryan Shazier was one of the best middle linebackers in the NFL at the time. Coming out of Ohio State, which produces animals on defense. Ohio State, in my mind, is like a defensive factory, a defensive back linebacker factory. That's just how I look at it. All right, Offensive Rookie of the Year. Mark, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go a little bit off the map. I know there's a more obvious pick, but how about Josh Jacobs from the Oakland Raiders?
It's an interesting pick.
The Raiders have surprised a lot of teams this year. They're slightly outside of the AFC playoff picture, but we saw them on Hard Knocks. They are a team that's got a lot of potential. They got the draft picks in the Khalil Mack trade, which I still don't think was necessarily the right move, but Josh Jacobs, one of those draft picks, certainly proven that he's going to be a top 10 running back in the long run and could be for many years. I would say he's almost exactly what expectations were, if not succeeded them a little bit. And he's definitely in the top 3 Rookie of the Year conversation. I'm going to give it to him at the moment.
Yeah, he's also very blessed to have John Gruden as his head coach. John Gruden, one of the best film readers It's one of the best characters we've ever had in the NFL. We'll touch base on Gruden a little bit later. But my offensive rookie of the year, his team's not doing that well. But first overall pick, Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray is the perfect example of what teams didn't want to happen with, So what happened with um, Russell Wilson? Russell Wilson got slept on, drafted in the third round, turns out being one of the most reliable quarterbacks in the NFL. And I look at Kyler Murray, and I think teams didn't want to make that same mistake. That's why Kyler went first. And I think Kyler's showing everyone why quarterbacks like him, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, are going to take over the NFL. And you're starting to see less pro-style quarterbacks because of how fast defensive linemen are getting. Nose tackles back then weren't like Aaron Donald. And Aaron Donald has defensive end speed, and you don't see that. And you need lateral quickness as a quarterback now. That's why guys like Lamar Jackson are doing so well. And I think Kyler Murray, guys that can throw on the run. You look at guys like Joe Burrows, Tua, those guys can throw on the run. And I think if they have the right system, like Kyler Murray does in his coach Lincoln Riley, no, never mind. Lincoln Riley is not the coach. Cliff Kingsbury, excuse me. If you see what Cliff Kingsbury does, he brings that college-style offense to the Cardinals. And I think it's something defenses haven't seen before. And I think Kyler's in the right place to do it because, young coach. That's why I think, and I'm calling it now on Mark and Graham, you heard this first, the Browns are going to fire Freddie Kitchens, and they are going to hire Lincoln Riley, and he is going to resurrect the Browns and Baker Mayfield's career. You heard it here first on Mark and Graham. So back to what I was saying, Kyler Murray's in the right spot, and I want to get your opinion on that real quick after I go to you. But yeah, I think Kyler Murray's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, and I would totally. Kyler Murray, I think, has a very bright future, and it's not necessarily because of his legs, because we've seen a lot of quarterbacks get drafted as big-time running quarterbacks, but that can't really throw. Honestly, Lamar Jackson coming out of college, his biggest issue was his accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I knew coming out of college Kyler Murray had a bright future is his accuracy. It's not just about his legs. He's a phenomenal accurate passer. They compared him to the accuracy of Baker and Drew Brees, that type. I'm watching his first preseason game this summer. I remember I had never seen a quarterback in his first preseason game make passes like that, pinpoint accuracy. I was impressed from day one, and the reality is the Cardinals don't have all that much around him right now, and he's still performing this well. I think what is interesting, too, is the absence of David Johnson in that offense. He's not really doing anything. It makes you question what the fit is with Kyler Murray. Is that somebody that's going to get traded in the coming future? I mean, he looked like a star a couple years ago when he was a rookie out of Northern Iowa with Carson Palmer, and that was a playoff team. But now David Johnson, I question if he'll ever get back to that level. They might just go with Chase Edmonds and Kenyon Drake at this point. It's interesting to see.
Yeah, that Cardinals team, ever since Carson Palmer left, they've been in like a real middle of the pack state. They really haven't had good quarterback play, and I think the Cardinals are really still trying to find themselves, find their identity. They're a young team. Their leading wide receiver, who isn't named Larry Fitzgerald, is Christian Kirk, and Christian Kirk, this is his second year in the league.
Yeah.
And I think this goes to show that the Cardinals just need some time to develop and so forth. So we're going to move on to our Defensive Player of the Year. Mark, if you want to give us your Defensive Player of the Year first, let's hear it.
I'm going to go with something that rarely ever happens in any sport, which is a guy winning a huge award like this who was traded mid-season. And I'll say Marcus Peters as my Defensive Player of the Year.
Good pick.
Because before he arrived in Baltimore, the Ravens were good, but they weren't this good. And that's because of their defense. Their defense was very lackluster in the beginning of the year. They lost C.J. Mosley in the offseason, and it showed. They really didn't have all that much talent. Their corners were weak. And ever since Marcus Peters got there, they are a top 5 defense in the NFL. And I was never a huge fan of the guy. He's been a problem everywhere he's gone. And somebody that ends up on 3 teams in 2 years is never the best locker room personality. But talent speaks for itself, and numbers on the field speak for itself. He's been phenomenal since showing up in Baltimore. It makes you wonder if it was just the right fit, if he just needed to find that home, find a coaching staff that fit him. John Harbaugh is a defensive guy, and I think he deserves it for the impact he's made on that team. He, you could argue, has really brought the Ravens from a playoff contender to a Super Bowl contender solely based on his presence.
I think you could just tell from post-game interviews that the Ravens have the best locker room dynamic I think I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, you know, when the kicker gets involved with inside jokes, that it's a great team.
That's true.
Yeah, like you never see a kicker get involved with the jokes, with the running backs, with the quarterbacks, especially Justin Tucker and Mark Ingram and Lamar Jackson. Like, you never think Justin Tucker would be like cracking jokes with Mark Ingram, but they are. And I think John Harbaugh, excuse me. Wait, is it Jim or John?
John.
John. I get confused with them all the time. John, I think, has done a great job at, instead of Lamar and the Ravens adhering to his, way of coaching, he adheres to the way his team plays. And I think it's so, because they have fun. And when you're having fun, your team's going to win every game.
He is a brilliant coach.
He is a brilliant coach.
That team, no matter who your quarterback is, Joe Flacco, Lamar Jackson, they're always in the mix.
People forget.
That's coaching. When you're a team that is in the mix every single year, when you're Bill Belichick, you're Andy Reid, John Harbaugh, those are the guys Pete Carroll, those are the guys that come to mind. The truly great coaches, you are in the playoff conversation every single year, no matter what the circumstances are. Another guy like that, Mike Tomlin, in the playoff picture every year.
You know who isn't in the playoff picture every year? Jason Garrett. Okay, so my defensive player of the year, same position, got traded to the Patriots actually, I think 2 years ago. Stephon Gilmore. I've never seen a cornerback have more of an effect on a game right now than Stephon Gilmore is having. The guy has 4 interceptions, right? He matched his total from last year. He's got over 60 tackles. And Stephon Gilmore has he's fifth in pass deflections or pass defenses. The guy's unstoppable. You look at, when he versus big guys, he held Julio under 50 yards. He holds guys. He holds your number one receiver. And I think when he does it on a weekly basis, not bashing Marcus Peters at all, just remember, he's got Earl Thomas too. And that Patriots defense, the McCourty twins are good, but Gilmore's a lot better. And I think Gilmore's a huge part of this Patriots, defensive success. Mm-hmm. And you could look, the Patriots are 10-3, but they're not 10-3. The defense is 10-3. That offense is so lackluster, and I think when you could see the results more on defense, I think that is more rewarding for Defensive Player of the Year. All right, Offensive Player of the Year. Me and Mark can do this one together because we had the same one. It's pretty obvious. Mark, you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting there when we were coming up with the list. We were like, oh, let's try and have a different player for every single one, just for the sake of conversation. Like, for example, Offensive Rookie of the Year. As much as I said Josh Jacobs, it's pretty obvious it's gonna be Kyler Murray.
Exactly.
But Offensive Player of the Year, you can't even make an argument for somebody other than Christian McCaffrey.
If he doesn't win MVP.
And he has a shot, but we all know who probably is going to get MVP.
Big trust.
McCaffrey.
Meet me outside the bank if you don't believe me.
McCaffrey.
Big trust.
He's on a team that has just been terrible all year, and his numbers are unbelievable. He's the best running back in football, no questions asked. And he's going to be for a long time. He's doing it with a quarterback who sucks, in my opinion. Kyle Allen is awful.
Oh, sucks. And Cam Newton sucks, too.
Terrible. I don't know what they're going to do. They need to draft a quarterback. But if they do draft a quarterback, you pair him with Christian McCaffrey, you're going from one of the worst teams in the NFL to a Super Bowl contender immediately. That's how good Christian McCaffrey is.
So definitely CMC for Offensive Player of the Year. After this section, I want to ask you a quick question about coaching replacements. But MVP, I'm gonna go first because I have zero doubt he's not gonna win. Making '04 Michael Vick look like a washed up has been. That's Lamar Jackson. The dude has over 1,000 rushing yards already. He is on pace to break Michael Vick's record. All he needs is about 30 more yards. Vick had 1,093, I want to say, or 1,039. It was one of those. But Lamar Jackson's going to break it. He's going to set the record for most rushing yards by a quarterback in a season. Lamar Jackson is just doing things that defenses don't know how to fix.
Mm-hmm.
They run a package with 3 Heisman winners in it. That has never happened before. And I think it's great, speaking of that the Baltimore Ravens, they're doing this well, and they're making RG3 feel like he has some importance on the team. You know, I like RG3. I thought RG3 was good, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about Lamar Jackson. I thought, hush, Lamar Jackson is simply amazing. He is one of the most exciting players to watch in the NFL. You never know what he's going to do. He runs backyard plays that I used to run when I was 3, like reverses and quarterback sneaks. And, you know, you don't come across a player like Lamar Jackson who could run for 150 yards but pass for 300 yards. It just doesn't happen.
When he shakes some of these defensive backs in the backfield and
actually
breaks their ankles as if he is Saquon Barkley or Christian McCaffrey, it's unbelievable. How are you playing quarterback and you're that shifty? And it's just something that the NFL has never seen. And I don't know how. The biggest way to stop a quarterback in football is to bring pressure and to get in their face and cause them to make quick, rash decisions. You can't do that with Lamar Jackson when literally anytime you bring pressure, he's going to avoid it and run. And the thing is, obviously, a lot of teams would do that with other quarterbacks, but you can't because there's no quarterback that's that elusive and can still throw the ball consistently. He is doing something nobody expected, which is throwing the ball with great consistency and accuracy. Last year, it didn't look like this at all. He somehow, over the course of the offseason, found a way to really improve his arm, and he completely changed his profile of a player that he is this year, and that's what's going to make him the MVP in the end.
But there is always a but.
I'm going to make a case for one other player, and it's at a position that has never won NFL MVP before, but I will tell you right now why Michael Thomas deserves an MVP this season. The Saints are a better team, in my opinion, than the Ravens are.
But is it because of Michael Thomas?
Michael Thomas has kept this team afloat all year as the number 1 team in the NFC. Don't forget, Drew Brees went down. Teddy Bridgewater came in.
Bridgewater is...
Who was there every single snap? Michael Thomas. He's going to lead the NFL in receiving touchdowns, I believe, and breaking the all-time receptions record for a single season by a huge margin. He's been phenomenal, and he's doing so with 2 separate stints of Drew Brees, who is not playing like Drew Brees we know, although he was excellent in the game against the 49ers on Sunday. He really hasn't been that great this year. Then he also had a stint of Teddy Bridgewater. Michael Thomas has kept that team afloat all year. They're going to be the number 1 seed in the NFC, and I put it solely on him. Lamar Jackson has a lot around him. Michael Thomas has played with much less circumstances this year. I think Michael Thomas is, if we've ever seen a case of a receiver deserving MVP, this is the year that it happens.
All right. Well, you know what? That's a very fair point. So we are about to do 3 top 10 lists that me and Mark put together in honor of our 10th episode, and we figured we'd do something super exciting. But real quick, Mark, who has a better fit on the New York Giants? Ron Rivera or Mike McCarthy?
Honestly, I don't like either of them for you guys. I know the talk about Mike McCarthy. I've heard it before, but I've never been a fan. Mike McCarthy took a team that Mike Holmgren had with the Packers for so many years, winning with Brett Favre, and he took that exact same team, won 1 Super Bowl off a very talented roster, and really did nothing else. That team, the Rodgers dynasty, which you can't even call a dynasty, we're going to get into dynasties later, but you can't even call it a dynasty because they won one Super Bowl
Yeah,
because
no,
of Mike McCarthy.
they're not a dynasty.
And I just think the Giants, like, if there's one thing you want that you make a case for him for, it's that he knows a good quarterback coach relationship, and that's something that Daniel Jones could make a lot of sense. But I would say I think I don't love the fit for either one. I don't Ron Rivera or Mike McCarthy. I do think, what would you say, an offensive or defensive minded coach?
Oh, we definitely need a defensive minded coach. That's why I think Ron Rivera works perfectly. The offense, the offense will deal with itself. We have Daniel Jones. He's an accurate quarterback. You saw what Darius Slay did to Ronald Darby yesterday. Absolutely torched him. Darius Slay is raw.
Slayton?
Did I say Darius Slay?
I think that's like a
Darius Slay is a cornerback.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Darius Slayton is raw. He's filthy. He's fast. His routes are there. He's great up the field. You just got to work on his cuts a little bit. But I mean, Saquon. I think we need an offensive lineman, but I think it'll deal with itself. All right. So let's get to our first top 10 list. We figured we'd start off with something that's very close to us, that really inspired us to do what we want to do, and that's sports media members. ESPN, Countdown, TNT, ABC, NBC, you name it. Me and Mark accompanied a list of our top 10 favorite on-air personalities. Excuse me. And I think we're going to start at number 10. We're going to start at number 10 with the voice of college football, Kirk Herbstreit. Mark, you want to talk about Kirk Herbstreit a little bit?
Yeah, I think he, like you said, he's the voice of college football. And I mean, we mentioned when we were coming up with the list, Lee Corso and a couple of the other guys, but Corso kind of has lost his mind over the years. Sad he's getting old and it happens. But somebody like Kirk Herbstreit has just he's been around year after year.
Year after year.
And one thing I always respected about him is that they do those game day picks every single morning. And on the last pick, every single week is the game of the week, the 8 o'clock game on ABC. Herbstreit never, ever picks that game because he doesn't want to be biased to a game that he's going to be calling later that night. Mm-hmm. And that's just something that I respect a lot. As somebody that wants to get into the industry, you got to respect people like that who really just do their job, do it well, and he knows college football like nobody else.
All right, number 9. I definitely think he was really great for the NFL. Still is. Chris Carter. Played wide receiver for the Vikings. He is really, really good with calling. And I think, Chris Carter, I used to get so excited when he got frustrated because he was one of those guys that because he played, he had so much raw emotion. And I think he looked at everything on a real personal level because he knows a lot of the guys he talks about. And Mark, I'll let you touch on Chris Carter a little bit, but I definitely loved listening to Chris Carter growing up. And I think that from a player's standpoint, anything he says you really want to listen to. And, he's just one of those guys that, his voice may not be the best, but the IQ is insane.
Yeah, his past too says it all. He had some major off the field issues when he was in football, got cut by my Philadelphia Eagles, and revised his career completely with the Vikings, becomes a Hall of Famer. I mean, his story is incredible, and I love when a guy like that then becomes an analyst because I respect an opinion like that more than anyone else.
All right, number 7, one of my personal favorites. Really, since we're talking about the decade, he's fairly new in this decade. Max Kellerman. He went from, I forgot what show he was on with, all right, whatever. Well, he's on Get Up with Stephen A. Smith. He does boxing, calls basketball games. Max Kellerman is Skip Bayless with all the knowledge. Max Kellerman, I love the guy. I think what he says is so logical. I was listening to him this morning, and he says, evidence is my proof. That made no sense. He said, statistics is my proof. And that's the way I look at things. He makes his decisions based off the numbers. And it's just, slight opinions. But I think Kellerman really says it the way it is. And he's on with someone we'll talk about in a little bit. But, Mark, you have anything to say about Kellerman?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I never liked Skip Bayless much, but First Take has really, really um,
First take.
taken a step for me. I think since Kellerman, I love watching the two of them. I think they have a really good
Chemistry.
yeah, chemistry exactly together, like me and Graham. And I love having him on there. I think it's funny that when him and Stephen A. Go at it the way they do together. But I also really respect his opinion. He's a guy that knows what he's talking about. He has a lot of experience in the industry.
All right, number 7. Another guy played for 13 years, won a Super Bowl. That's Ryan Clark, and I think Ryan Clark is the definition of new decade sort of sports personality. He brings that new flair. They have a segment called "What Is Ryan Saying," where he reads his tweets, and I think having Ryan Clark on is great because he's a voice of us, of the new generation. I grew up when I grew up watching the Steelers. Ryan Clark was the Steelers safety, and I think he brings this, again, like a new flavor. The way he words things, the way he talks, the way he thinks like a player. He calls players out when he knows they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He knows what they're doing, and I think he gives a really good insight of current players' mindset.
I agree. He's really well respected right now in the industry, and there's a reason. I mean, something I can always tell too is when SportsCenter has a lot. They have a lot of guys.
A lot of guys.
Are former players that used to just be recurring guests, and when they keep coming on, you can tell that ESPN and SportsCenter really like them. And eventually, they hire them.
And
that's what happened with Ryan Clark. He originally was just a guy that would come on a lot, and he was so good that audience members loved him so much, and ESPN hired him. He's been phenomenal ever since. And going into number 6 from there is a guy who, when you think of
back,
and you think of football, you think of the home run derby.
Will he go all the way?
Boomer, Chris Berman. There's few that have a voice that is as memorable as his.
It takes a special guy for a 10-year-old kid to want to watch a 60-year-old man talk about football. I would look forward to Swami Says every Sunday, where that's what really inspired one of our segments that we were doing. Where I would give Mark a game and he would spit out a score. That's exactly what Swami Says was. Chris Berman to me was like, he was Mr. ESPN, him and Bob Levy. And, as a 21-year-old kid who, Chris Berman was an OG guy. When ESPN started, Chris Berman was the lead anchor. Him and Bob Levy, they did their thing. Chris Berman really pioneered this business. And he isn't in our top 5, but he still definitely has to be honored like he's in the top 5 in my mind because I love Chris Berman. Mark, you got anything more to say about Berman?
No, I mean, I think you touched on it all. It's just he's a legend, and getting the legends, that's number 5 as well. He's a guy that I personally never had that much of a connection to. I wasn't his biggest fan. I didn't love necessarily his style of broadcasting, but the one thing about him I will say is the legacy that he left behind and how respected he was by his coworkers. And this is Stuart Scott, who RIP passed away recently, and I feel like he was one of those guys where you didn't realize what you had until he was gone.
Mm-hmm.
But he was definitely a legend.
He was as cool as the other side of the pillow, as he used to say. Stuart Scott, again, every anchor has something to make their own, like catchphrase or Chris Berman, back, will he go all type deal. For Stuart Scott, it was booyah, cool as the other side of the pillow. And I think the best thing that guys like Stuart Scott had was the ability to make a Greg Popovich crack a smile. Guys like Craig Sager, Stewart and Craig Sager. Craig Sager's not on our list, but you look at guys like Craig Sager and Stuart Scott. They look at an interview with Greg Popovich as fun time. They want to have fun with that, and I think when an athlete comes up to you and says, "We're so happy you're here," I think that's when you know you've done your job. And I think Stuart Scott had that effect on the entire community.
I agree.
So we're gonna head into our top four, and I'm gonna start out with saying it's March Madness, baby. Number 4, Dick Vitale. If you don't know Dick Vitale, literally watch any March Madness game. Mark, I'll let you talk about Dick Vitale a little bit.
Yeah, when you think March Madness,
Dickie
same
V.
way you think college football, you gotta think Dickie V. He is a legendary voice, and I just think college basketball wasn't necessarily the most popular sport in the world before he came around. And I think when a television character like him comes around and changes the sport and brings popularity to a sport the way he has with college basketball, that's when you know you made it in this industry. When you think of a sport and you think of one person's name in the media industry, like, it's unbelievable. You think of Dick Vitale before you even think of a lot of college basketball players or coaches. And he's one of those guys that's getting up there in age, so you question, like, how much longer do we have of Dick Vitale? But every single basketball game we ever watch of him, content that he has on ESPN, I mean, he's still just out there grinding, and he works like nobody else when it comes to college basketball season.
All right, so we're going to do our top 3 now. Number 3, this is going to be a surprise. I know he's fairly new, but he did something last year in the playoffs when the Chiefs played the Patriots that made me say, yo, Tony Romo belongs in the box. Tony Romo is number 3 because the man simply just reads formations and spits it out on the television before we even see it.
Mm-hmm.
This man called 4 straight plays before the Patriots ran him last year in the playoffs. And to me, that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen from a broadcasting standpoint. Tony Romo is the perfect example of why we need ex-NFL players, like quarterbacks. You look at the major leagues, they put catchers as managers. You put quarterbacks in the broadcast box because they know how to read plays. And I think, I'm going to stop talking because he's a Cowboy and I don't want to compliment him too much. But Tony Romo, the IQ is just incredible.
I mean, I hated his guts when he played for the Cowboys, obviously as an Eagles fan.
As a Giants fan.
I love seeing him in the box. He's such a smart guy. He honestly seems like a good guy, too. Like, I never really had a problem with him the way I did a lot of Cowboys players over the years that were all criminals, to be honest. Tony Romo's not like that. I love seeing him in the box. Every time I watch a game with him, I look forward to hearing him. And there's not many announcers these days that I feel that way about. He just adds an element that's really fun to listen to in a game and enhances the experience as an NFL fan. Number 2, the guy who runs late night Sports Center at this point,
Mr.
all by
Shiny
himself.
Head.
He was absent from ESPN for a while until he got his show back. But Scott Van Pelt is as good as there is in the industry.
As good as there is.
He is a professional of all professionals. And, I mean, especially the way he interviews the player of the night every single night, you could tell they just enjoy talking to him. Like, he's so well respected by every single athlete, team, coach. That's what, like, his show is fun. He does all kinds of unique segments like Bad Beats, adds a gambling style to his show, which is really unique and innovative in today's world where
and the way he
sports
talks,
gambling is legalized.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the way he delivers things, it's very professional. Growing up, it was Neil Everett, Stan Levy, Scott Van Pelt, Stuart Scott, Chris Berman. These guys that really brought ESPN in the early 2000s, and Scott Van Pelt was one of them. And I think he's just overall done a great job, and he deserves it. And number 1, the best personality on sports ever. He's my idol. I'm sure he's Mark's idol, and he hates the Cowboys like us. That's Stephen A. Smith. Stephen, if you're watching this, we love you. Stephen A. Smith, I don't even have to explain it. He's the best personality on television. Though his knowledge, he's honest, he's truthful, he gives you what you want to hear.
There's nobody like him. And Stephen A., you could watch, I mean, sometimes like me and my friends will literally go on YouTube and watch highlights of him because it's so funny and entertaining. But the thing is, like, he knows sports like no other. Obviously,
every sport.
Yeah, and like his relationships with players, he gets a lot of information because he's so close with players. People actually make fun of him for how he says, "Oh, LeBron James, very good friend of mine. Carlos Boozer, really good friend of mine." Like these random names. Like he
very good.
knows
he's friends with everyone.
Yeah, he's friends with everybody. But the biggest thing about him is the time he puts in. And it's unbelievable when you watch Stephen A. Smith and how he could literally be on ESPN all morning long doing content about, first, he's on First Take all morning long. That's a 2-3 hour show.
And he's sometimes on Get Up.
Exactly.
And Get Up runs from 8 to 9:30, which flows into First Take 9:30 to 11. I watch every morning.
Then SportsCenter comes on.
And then SportsCenter comes on.
Stephen A. will be a guest.
And he has a podcast.
Then you get to the 6 o'clock, and a radio show. Then you get to the 6 o'clock show of SportsCenter. They go live to Stephen A., who's on the court of whatever the basketball game is.
He works hard.
Giving an interview there. Then he works the entire game and then comes on Scott Van Pelt or whatever the late night SportsCenter is that night. He works like nobody else.
And you know what? Stephen A. Smith, every time he says something, it makes me turn my head and say, is he allowed to say that on live air? But that's what we want. That's a good personality. All right. So that's you heard it. That's our top 10 inspirations that have helped us get here to where we are now. We have 2 more lists before we get to a special section that we created for the 10th episode called Rapid Fire. So we're going to get through these 2 lists fairly quickly, but we're still going to get them. So top 10 dynasties. And if you don't know what a dynasty is, Mark, explain what you would define as a dynasty.
Well, when we were discussing this topic, like one that we mentioned earlier, the Packers and how Rodgers, for that team was kind of a dynasty, but they only won 1 Super Bowl. So you got to look at the teams that have really just won. And it's been for a certain period of time, I would say 5 years almost.
Almost 5 years.
You just dominated your sport. You won at least 1 title, if not a couple. And honestly, the teams that you think of are some of the biggest fan bases too, because they're like those bandwagon teams. But
this wasn't a very hard list to come up with.
Yeah, and in reality, you got to give credit where it's due.
All right, so number 10, excuse me, just because we had to. One of our biggest dynasties that we thought of were the Cowboys in the 90s. Emmitt Smith, Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin. I'm not going to really touch base on them, but they were a really good team. And they had one of the best coaches of all time. And that is when, I guess, Jerry Jones wasn't making stupid decisions. Mark, number 9?
Pittsburgh Penguins. We all hate them, but they've definitely been a dynasty over
Since
the past 2 decades.
Sid the Kid,
Sidney Crosby,
Malcolm, Marc-Andre Fleury, McFlurry.
That's a dominating team. We don't always give the NHL the conversation it might deserve on this show, but in the dynasty department, we mentioned 2 that are pretty obvious.
Number 8, John Calipari's Kentucky teams. The Anthony Davis team, the team with then he had a team with Bledsoe, Cousins, Wall, Patrick Peterson. That was the first time in the draft that a team had 4 players go in the top 10. Or, excuse me, first round, it wasn't top 10. If it was top 10, that'd be insane. But John Calipari's repeated success and then the team with Karl Anthony Towns, the Harrison twins, Devin Booker, Willie Cauley-Stein. That team was great.
Even there was, I forget which team it was, but they were an 8 or a 9 seed.
Yeah, that was the one that Andrew Harrison.
And made it all the way to the national championship.
Oh, they did make it to the national championship.
Like that, it was just, it's unbelievable. And Calipari gets a lot of rap for his one and done mentality, but it works. And
it works.
The craziest thing about it is it's not a one and done like Ben Simmons or like a lot of these guys who go to these small schools, they don't win and then they leave. Calipari teaches you
to win.
And if you ever watch the 30 for 30 on him, it's incredible. It talks about how when you go to that program, he doesn't consider he tries to win and he brings a lot of kids to national championships. But when he recruits, what he does is he tells these kids, I'm bringing you a lifestyle. I'm bringing you an NBA first round draft pick, and he's bringing that to your family. And I really respect his dynasty.
All right, Mark, you want to touch on number 7?
The Blackhawks. I think that's the biggest dynasty our generation has seen in hockey. They dominated for a 5-year stretch. It was
Taves,
ridiculous.
Kane, Seabrook.
Phenomenal.
It seemed like every other year the Blackhawks were winning Stanley Cup. And, in hockey, and like I said, I'm not the biggest hockey guy, but, what I've noticed in hockey is that, a team can be really good, wet the bed the next year, and then regroup the next year. The Capitals are the team I think about. All right, so next, again, any NBA fan, the Golden State Warriors. This team, coached by Steve Kerr,
dynasty, 100%. That core group with obviously Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, but then you add Durant, who I don't even really consider it part of the dynasty. Like, obviously, he improved them, but it's just that dynasty was. There's nobody that's really dominated basketball like that in a long time, and it was a core group. And as much as people like to say a dream team and how it's all big threes and recruiting, Golden State was not like that. Their dynasty.
They drafted that team, and it's sad to say
their dynasty was built upon that.
They drafted Draymond, they drafted Klay, they drafted Steph. Like, they drafted this team, so you got to give credit where credit is due. But as a basketball fan, you hate to see it. Next, again, so this dynasty really wasn't based off championships. I think this dynasty was based more off moral and mutual respect within the whole NBA, and that's the Spurs. During the Ginobili, Parker, Duncan, Popovich era. When those 4 guys were together, I think every time you played them, there was just a sense of respect. You know what I'm saying, Mark?
And you know what's crazy too? I always think about it is we often forget that the Kawhi Leonard we know now was on that team. Like, how crazy is that you had 4 Hall of Famers?
I mean, they won the finals.
And a Hall of Fame coach all together. I mean, that is a dynasty. And they built it with David Robinson back in the day, too. It's just...
and Tim Duncan was a part of that as well.
Exactly. And that's one of the longest-lasting dynasties I think we've ever seen. It seems like it finally is starting to die now because they don't have the talent that they once had. But they're still in the playoffs every single year. Just like we talked about earlier. Great coaches, you're in the playoffs every single year. Greg Popovich will be there every year. Doc Rivers will be there every single year. And it's really like coaching is everything in sports.
And I kind of look at it this way: what does Greg Popovich have to lose? He is always going to be referred to as one of the best coaches of all time. I have like a Mount Rushmore of coaches. You got Krzyzewski, you got your Popovich, and then you have whatever coaches you want to throw on there. But I'm just saying, when you're on that Mount Rushmore of coaching, you have nothing to lose anymore. At this point, Greg Popovich is doing it because he loves the game, So next, we're going to take it to college, Alabama. Specifically, Alabama football. Since the start of the Saban era, we don't really have to talk about this much. It's almost like they win a national title every other year.
Yeah, it's even when they don't win a title and they're in the conversation, and it's almost like nobody will admit this in the college football committee, but like if they are left out of the college football playoff, it's more of like spiting them because they're there every single year and they can't even afford a loss to get in. But Nick Saban, that team is ridiculous every single year. They produce more NFL talent too than any program in any sport. It's ridiculous.
They're a football factory.
Yeah, if you go to Alabama, you're going to the NFL, and that's a dynasty mentality.
All right, so top 3. Again, these are going to come to nobody's surprise. Number 3, the New York Yankees. And I'd say probably since the start of the 90s, it's just been dominance. And I know we haven't had a title since 2009, so I'm really referring to that 1990 to 2009 period. But Mark, as a Phillies fan who lost us in 2009, I feel like it's safe to admit that the Yankees had one of the greatest baseball dynasties ever created. especially with our core four, Pettit, Posada, Mariano, Jeter.
Yeah, no doubt.
Toss an A-Rod in there. It's like it's a 5-headed monster.
That dynasty, that was a dynasty, and it once again goes back to coaching. Joe Torre was obviously
Torre started that nine. That was Joe Torre's team.
Yeah, that's the name behind it. I mean, Girardi obviously ends up taking one in 09, right?
Yeah,
but
it was his first or second year as a manager.
Yeah, but no, it's no doubt, and those just have iconic players on those teams, iconic moments. Aaron Boone is now the coach; he's part of an iconic moment. Bernie Williams. I just think those names built something there that, I mean, as good as the Yankees might be now, it's not. Their dynasty's over. It's a new group. They're hoping they can build that now, but that sort of like camaraderie and the buzz around the Yankees, the Bronx Bombers, then like that team was iconic.
Savages in the box.
They will never be forgotten.
All right, so 1 and 2, we're gonna say this real quick. Number 2, Chicago Bulls when they had Jordan, one of the most obvious dynasties still ever talked about. And number 1, the Belichick Brady era Patriots. Again, another obvious dynasty. We knew this was coming. Tom Brady has 6 championships. In my mind, he's the greatest quarterback to ever walk the earth. Just uncomparable. You can't 6 Super Bowl titles. It's just not heard of.
It's as much as we all love to hate them, they're the greatest dynasty in sports history, no doubt about it. That's when we talk about 1 and 2, Jordan's Bulls, Brady and Belichick's Patriots. That's just something that like they literally made a player that you can't. They literally one player on those teams is unquestionably the greatest of all time in both sports, and that's how you know they led a team so well that there isn't even a conversation about who the greatest of all time is. So, moving forward for our last segment of the show,
before Mark and Graham of the day, of course,
because we would never skip that, especially on the 10th episode. But we thought it would be fun to come up with a little quick rapid fire 10 questions for 10 episodes. Just a quick answer. We both came up with a list of 10 questions. It's going to be something or something else. You just have to pick one of the two. And we both made our list, so we don't know what each other has.
I'll go first, or you want me to go first?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Jeter or Trout?
Trout.
Favre or Peyton?
Peyton.
Harper or Bellinger?
Harper.
Lewis or Urlacher?
Ray Lewis.
Polamalu or Dawkins?
Dawkins.
Prime Tim Lincecum or Steven Strasburg?
Prime Tim Lincecum.
Brian Westbrook or Jerome Bettis? Making you pick against your own team right now.
Bettis.
Ooh. The greatest show on turf or the 85 Bears D?
85 Bears D.
Really?
Yes.
09 Ryan Howard or prime Mark Teixeira?
09 Howard.
Oh, he really loves his Philly teams, man. All right, last one. Figured I'd go with something controversial, and I want your reason why. LeBron or MJ?
LeBron. No. Jordan.
Why?
Because of the rings. 100%.
Because of the rings.
And I'm a huge LeBron guy, but I got to go Jordan. Because of the rings and because of...
And because of Phil Jackson?
I'll give it to that he was on one team his entire career. LeBron has really just... I'm a huge LeBron guy, but ever since he went to the Lakers, he's not the LeBron that I knew I once was.
I hear you.
There's something about him now.
All right, there you have it. That was my rapid 10. I hope you enjoyed my questions, Mark.
All right, here's my 10. We're going to start off with the football conversation for what will be the rest of eternity. Lamar or Mahomes?
Damn, you're hitting me with a hard one. If I'm thinking future, I'm going to go Mahomes.
James Harden or Giannis?
Giannis.
Eagles or Cowboys? Have I broken Graham?
I think you broke Graham. I can't say this on camera. You know what? Just because the Cowboys have broken my heart a lot more, I'm going to say the Eagles.
Golf or tennis?
You know what? That's a good one. Just because I admire how much precision it takes, golf.
Verlander or Scherzer?
We talking primes? Or we talking now?
Whole career.
Whole career, Verlander.
Michael Thomas or DeAndre Hopkins?
Again, another really hard question. The two elite wide receivers. Just because Drew Brees is playing quarterback, Michael Thomas.
This year, Ravens or Saints?
Another really hard question because the Ravens are riding some momentum. But the Saints just have... that's a hard one. Oh, that's a hard one. I'm going to go with the fountain of youth here. I'm going to go Ravens.
Wow. Doncic or Zion?
Doncic or Zion? Well, I haven't seen Zion play, and I can't really judge him based on how he played in college because he just, college is a different game now. I'm going to go Doncic just for right now. For right now, Doncic.
All right. I like this question a lot. I think it's a tough one.
Dude, you stumped me a lot.
Two players that this year have been phenomenal. One of them, we haven't really talked about this episode, but I'm a huge fan. Josh Allen or Jimmy Garoppolo?
Oh, God. Why would you do this to me? I love both of them. I know Josh Allen is, really good, but that's such a hard question. Oh my God. That's a good... He stumped me on that one. Josh Allen or Jimmy Garoppolo? Oh, this is such a hard question. Just because of his success right now, I'm going to go Jimmy Garoppolo. And just because he played behind Belichick and Brady, I have to say Garoppolo. That was extremely challenging. I definitely like those questions.
All right, and the last one, number 10, was McCaffrey or Saquon?
Oh, God. I have to go Saquon, Saquon is they're both Barry Sanders-esque type players.
Mm-hmm.
Just, if I'm really going to pick something so specific just because of how similar they are, in terms of leg power and a stiff arm.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. I think Saquon has a better stiff arm because their lateral quickness is so similar. It's but I definitely, in terms of running north and south, I think Saquon's got the game there. So before we wrap things up, first of all, we hope you've enjoyed episode 10. We are going to go with our Mark and Graham of the day. Mark, your Mark of the day?
Well, I had picked somebody a little bit different going into the show, but after just receiving some news, I'm going to go with the newest Philadelphia Philly, from Graham's Yankees, Sir Didi Gregorius.
It's such BS. I still don't believe it. I haven't seen any.
Our starting shortstop.
I haven't seen an announcement. If this is true, you suck, Brian Cashman. I don't know why we let go of Didi when we play in Yankee Stadium. His swing is made for Yankee Stadium. And maybe we could have signed him for something and traded him.
And now it will be made for Citizens Bank Park.
I am so sad right now.
Welcome to Philadelphia, your newest starting shortstop, Didi Gregorius.
So my Graham of the day goes to the Washington Nationals. It was said that they knew they were going to keep Strasburg or Rendon. I think they made the right decision because pitching is everything. You could find a good third baseman on the market, but you can't find good pitchers, especially pitchers that you could lock down on a 7-year contract. That the Yankees are going to lock down Garrett Cole on. Hopefully, knock on wood. The Nationals definitely won this. They needed a pitcher, and I think this makes Scherzer want to stay there even more. Mm-hmm. This was huge for Scherzer. A lot of pressure off Scherzer's back, I think. But overall, I think the Nationals did good. Mark, you have anything to say?
No, it's been a great run so far. We're 10 episodes into something that we started all the way back in the summer, and I'm excited that we've made it this far, and we're going to continue to pump out content.
Exactly, guys. If you have any suggestions, let us know. This was episode 10 of the Mark and Graham podcast, at Mark and Graham _podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Give us your feedback. Provide comments. We will be posting highlights from this episode. Check it out on our YouTube page, also at Mark and Graham. That is all, and we appreciate you guys. And we will see you guys for week 11 of the Mark and Graham podcast.
And next time on Skype.
Sir.